Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from everyone who's everywhere where you're listening to us. Thank you very much for coming here. We are here to launch, to show, and to share with you our manifesto, the manifesto of the people of the South for a fair and just transition. So this is an appeal to leaders, institutions, and all of our brothers and sisters who are in the different global Souths, but also to have a dialogue with all of the different people about issues that for us are very important, coming out of a deep crisis, but also where we have seen many different initiatives come together. And this is one that is seeking out dialogue and the possibility of working together with the different global Souths. So today we have people who are amazing people that have been working on putting together this space of dialogue and work together that we put together. And we wanted to come together. We've been meeting for a long time. And so we've come into the different global Souths and we're having a South-South dialogue in which where we see this manifest has come together and we've put together the document, but also an action plan that has come out of it. And today what we want to do is to present part of that proposal to you. Today with us is Garish Ashish Kothari, who is an Indian environmentalist who works in development, environmental interfacing, biodiversity policies, and also alternatives. One of the founders of Cal Pavrish, a nonprofit organization in India, which works on environmental and development issues. Thank you very much, Ashish, for being with us here today. We also have Trusha Reddy. She comes from South Africa, and she is a climate justice activist with 15 years of experience working both within and supporting civil society organizations in Africa and also globally. Thank you, Trusha, for being here with us. Maristela Svampa, who is part of the also the Pact of the South in Latin America. She's been pushing forward these sorts of dialogues and she's from Argentina. She's really a benchmark when it talks about Latin American critique, and she's done a lot of work on issues that have to do with editorial issues here in Latin America and throughout the world. And we'd like to thank all of the different colleagues that we hear from the Ecosocial Pact of the South, the IPS Institute, and also the Global Alternatives. We're just really happy to be able to do this today. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the stage to our guests today, which are activists for the manifesto. So first of all, we're going to hear from Maristela Svampa. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. I'm really happy to be here on this launch today. Well, this is something that we've been putting together for a long time now with the dialogue, really intense dialogue that we've had among the different Souths. And so I would very much like to say a few different words about this manifest and also the context in which we are looking from the Ecosocial Pact of the South, where we've been working for 3 years on this now. So over the last 3 years, the situation in the geopolitical situation has really changed a lot, and we've gone through an extraordinary crisis with a pandemic that has left so many different people in suffering. But we've also seen now the need to really update proposals into something that we're going to see that things that are happening in 2022, 23, a different type of a crisis that is going through the pandemic because of the increase in social inequalities and that we're seeing that's affecting the entire world, and the acceleration of climate change. And of course, the war that we're seeing, it's not the only war, the one that we have with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It has definitely had a major global impact because this has really led to also the energy crisis. And these are two major problems that we have And we hope that it will not lead to nuclear war. So this is a panorama that's very concerning. So the war in Ukraine and all its impacts have really exacerbated the schizophrenia, especially when we look at the European Union, where on the one hand, they say that they want to go through a decarbonization, but at the same time, they're doing gas, they're doing fracking and nuclear energy as a clean energies. But regardless, in this context, the new thing is not this activism that we've been doing over us within the peoples of the South for many decades, yeah, I mean, also centuries. But if we look at 2022, we have this acceleration of the green transition around the world to ensure the decarbonization facing this climate change crisis that we're facing. And so we're very much concerned seeing that we have this type of energy transition that's being imposed from the north, which is bringing us a lot of problems based on the impact that our people are suffering in our different territories, in our ecosystems. And so now it's urgent for us to ask ourselves, why is this energy transition happening? For whom? And so when we talk about the transition, the energy transition, or a transition and into in a comprehensive ecosocial transition, when we look at the north-south relationship, we really have to ask ourselves, who is really paying for this energy transition that is being pushed forward by the global north? And so what we're seeing now is that we're being having an energy transition that's being imposed to be presented as the only way forward, as if there were never any disputes or any other alternative. What we believe is that this type of energy transition that's dominant right now has three different characteristics that are the most important. First of all, it's a corporate energy transition, it's neo-colonial, and it's also unsustainable. And so I'm just going to say two words about each one of these. First of all, it's a corporate energy transition, as we have heard from our colleagues in the social impact and the health of governments in all of their different scales and with their different political actors. And so here, the energy transition is seen as an opportunity and with an accumulation of wealth and repositioning when we talk about geopolitics. And so we're not looking to change the energy system, but what they're looking to do is just change fossil energy for different types of energy, clean energy producing technologies. But the energy system continues to be very concentrated. Nor are they looking for a transformation of social relationships. So, for example, energy poverty that we're seeing in so many different countries. And that's something that we've seen not only in the South, but also in the North. They're not looking to include a social justice or environmental justice, nor are they looking to make any sort of connection to nature. And so the corporate transition points toward a process of decarbonization. And so with this co-modification of nature and of social relationships. And so when we have a codification of the nature and social relations, and also what we see here is that it's neo-colonial. Why? Because this is something that started with all of the resistance that we've seen in the global South and all of the different research work that has been done to this effect. So this is an energy transition that has been expressed based on the countries in the South, based on the North. The two have this, we look at Africa, South America, we have the balsa wood, and in Latin America. And we see that this is happening throughout Latin America. And so when we talk about responding to who is going to pay for this energy transition, who's going to pay for it, we clearly see that it's the people of the South, who once again become a reservoir in a zone of sacrifice in the name of this green transition. And more further, the North uses these types of agreements to use the South as their supply of green resources. And so we look at the different critical research that's been done. We hear that we are talking about here about colonialism or green colonialism. And so we have this type of transition, which further goes ahead with the ecological debt that the North has with the South. We also see that this is an unsustainable transition because they're looking to save capitalism and the rich nations, but also does not talk about a modification of our societies, nor of our patterns of consumption, especially consumption patterns from the richest countries and from the richest sectors of our society. And the truth is that they want to go toward the electromobility without changing the consumption patterns or the transportation system. And so they're trying to, for example, put the Ecosocial Pact of the South and the different populations of the South. And so we have to modify the consumption model that we have. This is a model that exacerbates the problems that we have with this ecosocial metabolism that we have, which is unsustainable. And so this is what has to be imposed on us. It's corporate, it's neocolonial, and it's unsustainable. And so what we need to do is change this model and show that the transition is in dispute, that there's not only one way to go, and that we are still have the time to be able to do a fair and transition for all of the people of the South. That is the idea behind the manifest, which is calling to the peoples of the South to choose and to reject these false solutions that we have with all of the force. We call to the political coordination with the peoples of the South and with all of these different critical sectors of the global North, and we demand payment of the debt, of the ecological debt, to be paid to the countries of the South. And we also reject the expansion of the hydrocarbon border. And we also say that it's very urgent to deal with the issue of leaving fossil fuels under the ground and eliminating extractivism. And we also demand protection of the defenders of nature who are being killed in the global South. And of course, to this effect, we are also putting a wager on a model that really changes this idea of energy poverty and using different energy projects that are with renewable energy that are distributed and managed by the communities themselves. So I'm just going to close out with something here. This manifest is inspired in the work that's done by Indigenous people, peasants, local communities, women, and also young people in the global South in all of the territories related to the rights of nature, good living, and the economy of care and water policy, agroecology, and this post-extractivism when we talk about energy sovereignty. This is a call for a socio-ecological transition that is full, it's democratic, it's popular, that will effectively seek to have a technical and gender-based and regenerative focus. And above all, what we really hope is that it will become a tool of struggle for our peoples. So as Maristela has said, this issue of the energy transition, but placing it in a place that is with a total connection and where energy is related there too. And it's so important that everything that supports life has this, and everything related to the building a society, care, the different justice, visibility of the multiple patriarchal, ethnical debt that our Southern people have, and the different colonial systems historically, they continue imposing their ways of life on our territories. And it's to this effect, and to talk a little bit more about how things are working in South Africa and all throughout Africa. You can see how you have all of these different postulates and what they have done there, where they are also making this wager toward fair and grassroots transitions, And so Trusha is here today to talk to us about that.
Hi, everyone. It's just wonderful to be here with all of you at the launch of this critical manifesto that's just come out. So I really think that the manifesto really points to the very unique and distressing times that we are living in at the moment. And it provides a really critical analysis on these realities from a global South lens. I think certainly when we look at Africa, the manifesto is, and its analysis is really just so very relevant. Africa, as you know, is living the climate crisis now. It's heating up faster than any other region, and the impacts are being felt very deeply already, and things are just going to get worse. And of course, the tragic irony is really that Africa's done very little to cause the climate crisis. And so urgent attention and urgent action is actually needed to be able to support communities in Africa to withstand the impacts and to be able to adapt to a very changing climate. But what we're finding that instead of that, we are finding instead of real solutions to the climate crisis being brought to Africa or even grown out of the African context, we find an array of false solutions that we're being hit with. They're being pushed onto the continent at an alarming rate. Things like net zero, the carbon markets, geoengineering, many of these so-called solutions, which are actually false solutions that Maristella mentioned as well, are really just hitting our continent. And then the latest one, of course, has been this expansion of gas under the guise of being a sort of bridging fuel, which we know it isn't. And in fact, it's fossil gas, and it's only going to deepen and drive the crisis even further. And the other thing that's happening is the new green extractivism as well, which is coming to Africa. So the plunder of our so-called green metals and minerals also happening at an alarming rate across the region, sort of led by China, but with Europe and the US and other countries in the global north sort of jockeying for power and trying to tear up the continent for these new green minerals and metals. It really is the creation, it's really a new wave of colonialism or neo-colonialism, as Maristella has already said. And it's creating new sacrifice zones on the continent as well, where people are being sacrificed for so-called development. But really what this is about ever more profit-making for corporates, and fueling as well the excessive consumption that's happening in the global north. So really the manifesto, I would think, is a rallying cry and call for an interrogation and undoing of this development model that is causing the problems that we're facing today, including these, as I said, these false solutions that are being pushed onto the continent. I think it's a rallying cry for us to relook at this new green energy revolution and the way in which it's being implemented across the entire continent. We really don't want this new so-called clean or renewable energy to be replicating the fossil fuel development models. And we also want to be able to support women and their communities in the defense of their territories, which is so very important at the moment. And we want the climate debt that is owed to Africa to be paid, and fossil fuels, of course, to remain in the ground. All of this is very accurately and poignantly, as I've said, put forward in the manifesto. And is really a call for all of us in the global South to also sort of build together in solidarity and defense of territory, and a real resistance against this new wave of neocolonialism, as I said, which is deepening the crisis. I think I'll leave it there. Back to you.
Now we're going to hear from Ashish, who has worked with us in oftentimes in these dialogues and we really thank him for being here with us today on this launch. Thank you so much, Ashish.
Thank
The floor is
you.
yours.
Thanks, John, Miriam, for and others for organizing this. And thanks, of course, to Maristella and Trusha for laying a wonderful ground for this conversation. I'm actually, the reason I'm dressed up the way I am is because I'm sitting in extreme northernmost part of India, Ladakh, which adjoins Tibet. And it's very interesting to be here at this time with this conversation because very recent, just 4 days back, an announcement made by the Indian government that 13 gigawatts of solar power is going to be produced in this region in Ladakh. It's a high altitude, cold desert area, and that this will then be transmitted to the rest of India for so-called energy self-reliance of India. And this is going to be taking place in one of the most ecologically fragile landscapes with a lot of wildlife, but also a lot of nomadic pastoral populations who are dependent on that landscape. So the potential implications of this mega solar project are quite worrying, quite horrifying actually. And this is in the context of India um, claiming to be a climate leader, to be doing a very significant energy transition, claiming that by 2030, 40 to 50% of its energy demand will be met by renewable or clean energy, and that it is doing a whole bunch of other things to reduce its carbon intensity of the economy, etc. Now, if you really look closely at these claims, they of course don't stand up to the kind of scrutiny, and they have the same sorts of problems that Maristella and Trusha spoke about. Firstly, for instance, clean energy is defined in India as including large hydroelectricity projects, which have their own devastating impacts, and also nuclear energy. So it's not just solar, wind, etc. Secondly, that even where it is solar and wind, it is mostly very, very large projects of the kind that I just spoke about that's going to take place here in Ladakh. Third, there's a lot of biofuel expansion, including in critical agricultural areas and forest areas. Fourth, there's a big push for electric vehicles, not so much on public sector, but actually private electric vehicles. And there's a huge demand now from a growing rich population in India. And fifth, all of this is also accompanied by a significant expansion of coal mining and coal-fired electricity power generation. So if you really look closely at it, the energy transition or the climate-friendly energy transition the Indian government is claiming has very, very serious problems of the kind that have already been spoken about. Why is it important to point these out in the case of India? Is also because just recently India took over the presidentship of the G20, which covers 2/3 of the world's population and almost all of the, or I think all of the most powerful energy guzzling countries in the world. And it is claiming that this kind of transition that it is doing is also going to lead the G20 into a similar transition, energy transition. So we can see that this is not just an Indian issue, it's a global issue, what is happening here. And we know, of course, that there are similar problems worldwide, as Maristella and Trusha have already pointed out, and as the manifesto very clearly also lays out. I think what's very important for us, and I'll spend 2-3 minutes on this, is to say what are the radical alternatives. The manifesto has a little bit of indication on this. We need to elaborate on that considerably. In terms of the technologies, of course, we know that decentralized renewable energy, which is controlled by communities for their own needs, is of course it's extremely viable. We have many examples of this in India and elsewhere in South Asia, mini solar grids and all kinds of other things. We also know that in terms of the control of energy, there are wonderful examples of energy cooperatives of the producers themselves, not private corporations nor the government, but actually worker-led cooperatives. We know that another one of the radical solutions is redistribution, because in a lot of countries, including to some extent India, there is a significant amount of energy that is produced, which is not actually being given to the poor. So there's a lot of inequality with regard to the use, the consumption of energy, and that redistribution is one of the ways by which the rich can be consuming less and the poor can actually get access where they don't have adequate energy so far. The fourth crucial issue is that when we speak about energy, we mostly are talking about electricity. Actually, it so happens that something like 60 to 70% of energy consumption in a country like India is non-electricity, things like biofuels and biomass and all kinds of other things. And very little focus in the energy transition is being given to non-electricity energy. And that I think is a very, very important point we need to look at. And here also there are amazing radical alternatives on the ground with the use of sustainable biomass, etc. Not biofuels at an industrial scale, but sustainable biomass produced by and used by communities. Fifth, and I think this is really crucial, is demand management. How much energy do we really need is a question we have to ask ourselves. Even if everything is renewable in terms of solar and wind, etc., if the energy demand keeps going up and up and up, and if India, for instance, is to take United States or Europe as an example of how much energy is to be consumed, there is nothing that's sustainable. It simply is not sustainable. And therefore, the whole issue of how much energy, who decides, who controls, etc., is very, very crucial. At this stage, if it's possible, I'd like to project a couple of slides because I think we need to look at this eco-social energy transition in the context of the sort of radical holistic transformation that needs to take place. So we do know that, and I'm sure my fellow panelists can also talk about hundreds of examples of these kinds of radical alternatives all across the world. What is important is to look at what is there some sort of a holistic picture that's emerging, which gives us an answer to the capitalist, statist, patriarchal system that we have right now. I think what emerges from these hundreds or thousands of fantastic initiatives that are really grounded in communities is what here in India we call the flower of transformation, which is looking at, if you look at energy transition, it needs to be looked at in the context of who takes decisions with regard to the economy. As I was saying, the eco-social energy transition needs to happen in the context of this holistic transformation, which includes radical democracy and autonomy on the ground of communities, which in fact challenges not just capitalism, but also nation-state domination. It needs to happen in the context of a radical transformation in the economy with much more worker control, producer control, food and energy sovereignty. So anyway, I will conclude by talking about how we need to look at this from this holistic transformation point of view, which also includes, of course, elements of social justice, gender justice, and so on, and the reconnecting of human society with and within nature, including, as I think Maricela also spoke about, recognizing not just human rights, but also the rights of the rest of nature. I'm very happy to be a part of this on behalf of the Global Tapestry of Alternatives, and we hope that we can spread the message of this eco-social transition, so energy transition from an eco-social and a radical democracy point of view to various different kinds of audiences, especially young people who are seeking the sorts of answers, who are very dissatisfied with the current system and are looking for what are the radical solutions and alternatives that they can be part of. So thanks again. I'm very sorry about the breaks, and I hope I'll be able to continue with the discussion. Thank you. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Ashish.
Yeah, Ashish, thank you very much. So the steps forward now, what we're doing together, the way forward with the dialogue, South-South, and that have produced this manifesto that we feel and we see as being something that expresses a shared vision, but also makes a calling for collective, global, and radical action, as Ashish has said. And these are, wide ranging. And so we would very much like, and I think that the possibility of presenting this manifesto in different languages thanks to translation is something that we need to do. And we will also continue trying to with the different governments. Elections. Now is the time, and front end with the grassroots movements and the different initiatives that we have around the world. So to that effect, what we'd like to do right now is to share a video that talks about the different debate from the Ecosocial Pact and Intercultural Pact of the South about environmental debt. And so our colleague Miriam is going to share the video, and and then we'll just close out our session. So here we go.
Resistencia de los pueblos que gritamos libertad, deudas que desangran nuestra tierra, nuestra paz. Resistencia de los pueblos que gritamos libertad, es tiempo que reparen, esto tiene que acabar. Resistance of the people who cry liberty, that owe to us leading out earth and our peace. Resistance of the people who cry liberty, it's time for reparations, it's a right history.
Crearon el juego, el tablero, el dinero, las reglas son simples, deudas o destierro. Llegaron en bestias con armas de fuego, llamaron conquista al robo del suelo.
Deprive the sons and daughters of the soil. Culture, land, the wealthy, wipe them all. But hustling gringo after gringo embezzle. Now say, flag say, we owe and ought to pay.
Mamamayang lumalaban, sigaw ay kalayaan. Utang na nagpadugo sa lahi ko't kasaysayan. Taong bayang lumalaban, sigaw ay kalayaan. Panahon ng iwas to, akasan na ito.
Deudas eternas que generación tras generación en explotación, saqueo, dominación. Defensoras liberando el territorio, gritando fuerte, devuélvanos el oro.
Nabundukan, hinalukay, kagupatan, kinalbo, higanteng gamitin na yung bulsa nila'y napaldo. Baha, pagguho, buhay na tao, kapalikido, kaya wala tayong utang, tayo dapat magbayaran.
Basta do patriarcado, onde o corpo território é território violado. Mulheres do sul global, aqui já não se cala. Vamos juntas e rebeldes afirmando nossa fala.
Resistência dos povos que gritamos liberdade, dívidas que sangram nossa terra, nossa paz. Resistência dos povos que gritamos liberdade, é tempo que reparo, isso tem que acabar.
Mujeres negras resistimos, ancestros caminando, alzando la voz, reconstruyendo el tejido en sus manos, generaciones sanando el dolor.
Expoliación colonial de la materia prima, tala masiva y el petróleo se nos viene encima. El clima cambia bruscamente, una nube que se avecina, llueven ya las consecuencias de hacer otra mina.
Sobrevivemos ao genocídio, exclusão, militarismo, capitalismo, ao processo de embranquecimento, negação, só queremos reparação.
Resistencia de los pueblos que gritamos libertad, deudas que desangran nuestra tierra, nuestra paz. Resistencia de los pueblos que gritamos libertad, es tiempo que reparen, esto tiene que acabar.
Resistance of the people who cry out to liberty. That owe to us is causing our earth and peace to bleed. Resistance of the people who cry out to liberty. It's time for reparations, it is time for this to end.
Thank you so much, Miriam. Thank you to everyone. So we want to now close things out. So based on these 8 points that Maristela mentioned that have been expressed in the manifesto, our alerts, the rejection of false solutions, the payment of the ecological debt, rejection to the hydrocarbon border, and rejection of the green colonism, and everything that we see in the manifesto, we are putting our wager initiative of dialogue also what we are looking to is to make evidence of from the different areas that make up this manifesto. And like some of our people have said in the chat, it really calls us to having an honest and sincere dialogue. And so thank you very much. I mean, the idea now is to put this into other languages, different videos and different multimedia options, but also in discussions and with the different initiatives that are radical and proposing how these transitions and just transitions need to be made. So I would like to, in these last 5 minutes that we have left, just to close out, a final comment from Maristela, Ashish, and Trusha, just to close out the session. So thank you all very much.
Bueno, si quieren voy yo porque veo que Truya todavía
Yeah, I could go because Trusha's not connecting yet, so.
Ok, entonces, no, sí, recordar simplemente, recordar que hay una frase del movimiento de la justicia climática que dice que la transición es inevitable, pero la justicia no. Nosotros tenemos que tomar esto como herramienta, porque efectivamente son muchos los problemas a enfrentar. Necesitamos poner énfasis en la protección de nuestras poblaciones y nuestros territorios que son cruciales, estratégicos, para hacer frente al agravamiento de la crisis climática. Pienso en la Amazonía, que nos tiene tan preocupados aquí en América del Sur, por el ecocidio y el genocidio que ha llevado a cabo Bolsonaro, sobre todo en Brasil. Hay que pensar también en las formas democráticas de la transición, una transición que efectivamente tiene que tener raíces locales distribuidas, pero que también, además de pensar en los actores, tiene que repensar cuál es el rol del Estado como impulsor de estas iniciativas locales. Y por supuesto, como bien se puso acá en el eje, la cuestión de la deuda ecológica es fundamental, sobre todo analizar y poner en la discusión las distintas dimensiones. Del Pacto Ecosocial e Intercultural del Sur hemos lanzado también un llamado a una contracumbre mundial de la Tierra, porque somos conscientes de que no podemos depositar esperanzas en conferencias multilaterales como la COP, que están siendo dominadas por los lobistas representantes de los combustibles fósiles. Mucho más de cara a la próxima COP que se va a realizar en los Emiratos Árabes. En este sentido, estamos proponiendo realizar una contracumbre global en América del Sur, en Colombia, donde se abre una oportunidad para discutir también cuestiones tan centrales de esta actividad. Lo nuestro son propuestas colectivas, abiertas, como siempre decimos. Esto es una plataforma dinámica que expresa, además de las categorías horizontes elaboradas por los movimientos, las luchas mismas de esos pueblos y las experiencias de reexistencia que bien mostró a través de esa cartografía estratégica Ashish en todo el mundo.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Maristela. And on the next steps, we want you to be a part. We want you to sign off the manifesto and to join this virtual events that we have. And also, these will also be events that will happen on site. And we have real conviction that only through this type of initiative, collective initiatives, community initiatives, will we be able to explain why, and we have to look at the people and what are the just transitions for us. So, from the global south, again, and green colonialism, and really putting ahead of us human rights of the people who defend the territories and the women who fight in these territories, that are the people who really take care of their places and everything else in all the different places where we see that the manifesto is going to be applicable. And we invite you to follow us on our website and to follow the different debates with social networks, with this Ecosocial Pact of the South and the Institute for Policy Studies. And also, we're all very grateful to Ashish, Trusha, and Maricela who were with us here today. Thank you very much. And we will see you soon.